Hello, Year 11. This will hopefully be a screencast less than 20 minutes preparing for one of the comparative essay topics that we've developed for To Kill a Mockingbird and 12 Angry Men in Year 11 English. So, the aims of the screencast are here. Basically, we're going to unpack the prompt, develop some ideas, put these into an introduction, and then plan out a comparative essay. So there's some I can statements there, which are what I expect you'd be able to do by the end of this. So the first thing we need to do is interrogate the topic. To Kill a Mockingbird and 12 Angry Men contend that justice rarely prevails. To what extent do you agree? Now, this is a common kind of question, a statement, and then this, to what extent do you agree? And these questions, which you will see in Year 12 exams, possibly on your end of year exam, etc., they require you to make an argument. So you need to have some firm opinions on the text and what it's doing in order to be able to make a case for whatever position you want to take on this idea of whether justice wins out or not. So before we get to that, we're going to unpack a few of the key words, which are contend, justice rarely prevails, and then this to what extent do you agree question at the bottom. So contend means to make an argument or an assertion. So that is, Lee and Rose, through the production of these texts, are making a statement about the ability for justice to be achieved, whether it can or it can't, in what circumstances, etc. Justice, I think, comes in three different forms, and that's how I'm going to be unpacking this question in terms of paragraph. I'm going to look at legal justice, which is determined by the body of law, the jury, your defence counsel, your right to innocence until proven guilty, the expectation of reasonable doubt, etc. You've got moral, which is determined by you as a person, what you believe to be just and acceptable behaviour. And then you've got social, which is determined by the group, and that is, do we give in to the majority or do we stand on our own morals quite strongly and object to things that we disagree with in the social context, the majority view. Now, rarely prevails is the next statement. Rarely means hardly ever, and to prevail means to win out. So in other words, if I rephrased this statement, I would say, Lee and Rose argue that fairness hardly ever wins. Do you agree or not? To what extent? So you might say, yes, at times there is a sense that maybe legal justice rarely prevails, but I would then be saying why. I'm going to say legal justice can't prevail when there are individuals that make it inherently racist. So when you have people on your jury that can't vote for a black man over a white man, or when you have bigoted or racist people like, say, Juror 10 and Juror 3 on your panel, when you have a poor legal counsel who don't do their job, etc. So those are the kinds of things I'd be thinking about there. I might say social justice is within the societies of Maycomb in 1950s New York, and I'd be looking at how those two social groups and social settings influence the way that people are able to objectively, which means to do so without prejudice, objectively participate in the legal system, and then how individual morals play out, whether some people can allow justice to win out, or whether some people prevent it from being achieved purely because of their own beliefs. And so you might say yes, no, or not always, but only in these circumstances. So you need to come up with a kind of argument, and I'll have mine on the next page. So I'm going to say, justice rarely prevails. So I'm going to disagree with that. Justice can be achieved, but only when individuals do not allow their prejudices and the group to dictate their behaviour. Both Lee and the author, both Lee, as an author, that should be Anne, and Rose as a playwright are conveying an underlying message about the potential to overcome prejudices and therefore achieve justice within societies in future. So they're kind of hopeful. I think they're both texts that are hopeful about what could happen if we overcome the prejudices that exist. If we are willing to show empathy, which means, like Atticus said, put yourself in someone else's skin and walk around in it. See what it's like to be them. And to cast our judgments. So that means in the social setting, but also in the courts when you're a juror, in an objective, which means non-biased manner. So we can overcome prejudices if we're willing to think about what it's like from someone else's perspective and ourselves be objective when we make judgments. Be that about Arthur Radley as a person, about the Cunninghams as a group of people, and how inherently they are quite good people. They don't mean bad things. Even though Walter's dad is involved in the mob, he is a good person, really, deep down. But do we treat him justly because of that, or is he treating people justly as well? So this is how I've divided my essay up, or how I'd think about structuring some body paragraphs. The first one is legal justice. When a court system is inherently racist, legal justice cannot be achieved. When I'm thinking about social justice, I'm going to look at the social setting of Maycomb and 1950s New York and see how forms of prejudice limit legal justice, but also social justice. So that people can't even stop and be empathetic because they don't care about other groups, so oppressed minorities, for example, African Americans, immigrants, etc. And how, if we want to overcome this and achieve justice in this system, which we don't want to be inherently racist, then we need individuals that show high moral standards and they're able to challenge and confront other people and lead them to kind of coming to a more just and non-biased opinion of other people, who aren't willingly casting judgment purely based on someone's skin or where they grew up, etc. So now that we've got those three ideas, we can move into looking at an introduction. So there are 5 parts to an introduction: an orientation sentence, introduction to the text and authors, a reference to the theme, response to the prompt, outline your arguments, and refer back, summing up what your conclusion is. So the courts are a vehicle through which society provides individuals with fair and just treatment in the eyes of the law. That could be developed. That's not perfect. You might say something about how, but it's imperfect because the people within it are imperfect. You might just add that little bit on the end there. 12 Angry Men, a play written by Reginald Rose, and the novel To Kill a Mockingbird, written by Harper Lee, both suggest that individuals must be conscious of their own biases and also find the courage to challenge those individuals who are prejudiced if just outcomes are to be achieved. The limitations of the American legal system and the fallibility, which means imperfect, fallibility of individuals who are responsible for upholding justice within it, is explored in these 2 texts, which demonstrate how individual prejudices can make the justice system inherently racist. The individuals who make up these courts are representative of the societies in which they are chosen, because a jury is selected from broader society, obviously. Lee sets her text in the American South in the 1930s, and Rose's jury room drama explores attitudes in 1950s New York. Access to legal justice is limited as a result of social norms and stereotypes that exist for African Americans and other oppressed groups, such as immigrants. Challenging the often prejudiced majority requires courage and strong personal ethics. So that's what my paragraph's going to be about. And then I'm summing up where I'm going to go with my conclusion. In 12 Angry Men, that should just be justice prevails after much debate when a not guilty verdict prevents the death penalty being wrongfully applied. In To Kill a Mockingbird, though the justice system is shown to be flawed and the crimes of those who... In To Kill a Mockingbird, though, the justice system is shown to be flawed and the crimes of those with power go unpunished. Rose and Lee's texts demonstrate the importance of making every effort to achieve justice, even when doing so leads to challenges and even personal danger. So I think that's the underlying message, that yes, there are times when justice doesn't prevail, but it doesn't mean we should give up. We should still try to achieve it, even if there are challenges and even if maybe we will be putting ourselves in danger. Okay, so then I went through the 2 texts and I grabbed a few different pieces of evidence from each. Now, obviously, you would not be using every single one of these quotes, but the reason that I've put a few in there is because then you can pick what you think is best going to help you make your argument. So I'm just going to leave these. You can pause the video and have a look at these. If it's not clear, just have a look below in the comments section and I'll put a link to these slides. And then I've got the same for 12 Angry Men. There aren't page references here because I didn't have them written down, and I've just kind of jumped all over the shop with different versions of this text. And I know you have different versions, so these are just the quotes that I've got for the moment. All right, the potential structure of a body paragraph is your topic sentence, evidence, explain, ignore that slide. Actually, I'm going to cut that. That doesn't work for me because that's for a different kind of essay. All right, so body paragraph 1. When a court system is inherently racist, legal justice cannot be achieved. Have a go at rephrasing that and putting it into your own words. Then I'm going to go and unpack that a little bit more. Legal justice means the entitlement to the belief that you are innocent until proven guilty and that you cannot be found guilty if reasonable doubt exists. Safeguards to ensure that legal justice is achieved include competent legal counsel and a jury of one's peers. However, both Lee and Rowe showed that because people are imperfect, the court system is imperfect. And because there is a deeply racist undertone in 1950s New York, the jury is quite racist, many of them, and in 1930s the southern states of America, you have a deeply racist society where it is the expectation always that a white man's word will be believed over that of a black man's. So people are imperfect, and so these two systems, these safeguards are imperfect because of that. And then you can go on and unpack that a little bit more. And now I've got evidence for 12 Angry Men, and then you've got, in contrast, Atticus delivers a strong case, but is at the mercy of a racist jury. And I've unpacked that a little bit there with some evidence for Atticus. I'm not going to give you too much in terms of exactly how to do it because I think you really just need to sit down and have a go at nutting it out yourself. There is, if I laid out a whole essay, then lots of you are just writing it on your own, just copying it straight out. And it's better if you have a go at trying to put these ideas into sentences, embedding those quotes and unpacking them a little bit. What does it matter that the lawyer hardly seemed interested and there were too many questions left unsaid? Why is that problematic, and how does that make the court system inherently racist and unjust, therefore? And you might talk about how he got no money for doing this job. It brought him no money, no glory, not even a chance of winning. So he accepted that the fate of his client was already set, and there was nothing he could do about it, and so he didn't care. And he accepts the fate of his client purely based on his skin color and the fact that he's grown up in the slums. That's what we're led to believe. Just in the same way that Juror 10, Juror 9 and Juror 4, Juror 4, 10, and 3 make the same assumptions based on what they know about the boy that's on the stand. And then you would obviously contrast that with Atticus's jury and the old Sarum bunch. They're all farmers that are there. But he says they can be reasonable men, but obviously they are led by the majority and the social norms of Maycomb in the 1930s, which suggests that they have to vote a specific way, and that is for a guilty verdict for Tom Robinson. All right, second paragraph. The social settings within each text show various forms of prejudice, limit not only legal justice from being achieved, but also social justice. And then you could launch into Lee uses 1930s Maycomb to explore the social fabric of the American South and the way that individuals are allocated in a caste system, and how that dictates the way that they're going to be treated socially and the implications that obviously has on the court system. And then you go, you're going to link the two, whilst Rose's play is set 2 decades later in a more forward-thinking New York, the men who form the jury show how their assumptions and social stereotypes prevent them from acting in a just manner. And you could talk about, I've got here Juror 4, Juror 3, and Juror 10. Now, again, there are probably 8 quotes there. You're not going to talk about all of them. Pick 1 or 2 jurors and zone in on what they're doing and maybe what's common between them. Okay, and I think juror 4 is a great one, and juror 10. They might be your best pick, but it's up to you. The last one, justice relies on individuals behaving in an objective manner, consciously being aware of their prejudices in an effort to overcome them. And I thought it would be good to zone in on some other jurors and have a think about the way that they try to overcome injustice. And for example, juror 5 forces the others to confront what they might think about people who are from the slums when he says, I've lived in the slum all my life, and there's something personal about this. So they're making it very personal by saying that everybody from the slums is a menace, which is what juror 4 says. Sorry, here. Slums are breeding ground for criminals. They're all potential menaces to society. And so he's saying that that's quite personal, and he's forcing them to confront their own beliefs and think, well, if he's from the slums and he's a perfectly reasonable individual, here he is on the jury, then maybe some of the assessments that we've been making are wrong and are based on inaccurate evidence. Juror 9 also draws parallels between himself and the elderly witness that's on trial, and he talks about how this man was quiet, frightened, insignificant. Nobody knows him, nobody quotes him, nobody seeks his advice. And by doing this, juror 9 is setting the picture or setting up the jurors and the audience of Rose's play to think about whether this gentleman's testimony, the old man that was on the witness stand, whether his testimony is based on prejudice himself, and whether he's just doing it not to lie, because that's not what he thinks he's doing, but perhaps he believes those words because he just wants to be seen as somebody who's important. And by drawing this parallel, because he seems to be someone who wants to be seen as important too, he's able to get people to become a bit more aware of where prejudices might lie and how they might be overcome. If we stop and think about what it would be like to be in his shoes, then we can consider that the evidence he's giving may not be accurate. So both juror 5 and juror 9 show courage in revealing their personal lives, and in doing so force the other jurors to confront their own prejudices in a bid to achieve a just outcome for the accused. This sort of enlightenment, which means kind of education, is less clear in To Kill a Mockingbird. However, there are small acts of courage to suggest that justice might well prevail if people take the time to climb into another's skin and walk around in it. So you can talk about the Cunninghams and their involvement on the jury, and there was one man who kept them discussing the matter for quite some time. And you might talk about how Miss Morty's reflections on Atticus is that we trust him to do what is right. That is, the handful of people who say that is fair, that say a fair trial is for everybody. So whilst Atticus shows courage for the whole people of Maycomb, and when I say the whole people, I mean the forward-thinking group who believe in a just outcome for everybody, he's showing courage for them on their behalf. It's not as successful as these gentlemen. I think you need to point that out. That he tries and he fails, but there is that quote where he says, just because we were licked 100 years beforehand doesn't mean we shouldn't try. I'm not sure where it is. It's in one of these. Here we go. Simply because we were licked 100 years before we started is no reason for us not to try and win. So it doesn't matter that he thinks that the outcome is inevitable. He still thinks it's important to do what is right, and to show empathy for Tom Robinson, who he thinks is a good person, and to try him fairly. But in the end, Lee is saying that it will take many people like Atticus before the prejudices of the American South can be overcome. And if you look at the American South today, you might say that still it hasn't been overcome for a lot of people. You can sum that up. Right, I'm just going to leave it there. Your kind of conclusion can come back to this sentence here. It's almost kind of a rejigging of that with just maybe some additional points you might want to add, or some extra notes. And the last slide here is, these are two sets of quote documents, and you can go in and have a look at those if you want to get some other pieces of evidence. I'll leave it there. Hopefully we haven't gone too long. Good luck with writing it. If you've got any questions, feel free to email me. Thank you.